All right, here we are with the components that are going to go into most of making this bridge. The first thing we have to think about is that bridges don't just sit on the ground at the end. And so I'm going to use this cleaning rod here as a pointer. We have bridge abutments. A bridge abutment has a couple of functions. It holds back the earth with these wings, so it holds back the fill underneath the bridge. It has this shelf here that the weight of the bridge bears down on. Now the bridge doesn't actually just sit on the abutment. Every bridge is pretty much a custom affair, no matter how it's built. So we need bridge shoes and adapters. They go and transfer the bridge's weight onto the abutment. And this is a different type of bridge shoe right here. We're going to need several different types of bridge. We're going to need plate girders. We're going to need a tower. And we're going to need 2 truss bridges. Additionally, one of the things we're going to need, because again, everything is at least semi-custom when we talk about bridging, is I've put together 5 sets, 5 bags of Central Valley truss kits. And that will go ahead and allow me some flexibility in supporting the bridge. Okay, this is a pretty decent selection of tools for model railroaders and modeling in general. So what do we have here? Well, the first thing that I've got here is a pair of sprue nippers for cutting pieces of material, the molded parts, off of the sprues that they come attached to. That particular tool is only for plastic. I've got a pair of flush cutting pliers and a pair of side cutters. Those two are both strong enough for thin wire if I need it. I have 3 different kinds of tweezers. Here, what I've got is dental picks, 2 different types. There are some curved ones down in the basement, and a couple of straight ones. A quality multi-tool is hard to beat. An X-Acto knife, which I didn't bring up because we probably all know what an X-Acto knife looks like. Although you may not know it, X-Acto also makes a miter box and a fine saw. There are saws from X-Acto that are finer than this one if I need it. Obviously, we have here some adhesive and evaporative glue. I have an HO-scale, multi-scale model railroader ruler, HO-scale, S-scale, O-scale, and on the back, N. And I've got something else that a lot of modelers in various scales may not think about. This is a hemostat. It's shaped like a pair of scissors, but they're really a fine pair of pliers, and if you listen closely, they lock. And then to get them to unlock, all you have to do is push them apart at the base. You can find this in various small tool catalogs like Micromark, or you can go to larger gun shows. There's almost always an area at a gun show where somebody's selling stuff that's alleged to be medical supplies, and that's where you find these. They're really not expensive. They do have some serration. If you don't want the serration, it doesn't take much to get rid of the serration, to have it ground off. And finally, if you're familiar with job shops that do metalwork and blacksmithing, one of the things that they tend to have is a granite surface plate to ensure that things that need to be flat are actually flat. Well, we're building a bridge from plastic on a model railroad. We don't need something that's a granite surface plate, but I do have very fine sandpaper stapled to a scrap plywood. Is it perfectly flat? No, absolutely not. But this is going to be as flat as I need it to be. Unfortunately for me, as an HO scale modeler, I've had this problem since I started model trains when I was 10. I have HO scale equipment, but when I go to try and design a scene, for some reason I think in N scale. So I need to build the kits and then lay them out where they're supposed to go in order to really be able to flesh out the scene in my head. So the first thing that I want to do is take a look at the tools again that I've got laid out here, and then talk about how I approach building a kit. I've got a piece of parchment paper laid out here so I don't glue anything to my kitchen table, which is something I've done before. I've got a couple of three pairs of tweezers of various sorts. I have some picks, straight and angled. I have some locking hemostats from X-Acto. I have a miter box and a saw. I always like to have quality multi-tool handy. I've got some evaporative glue. I've got nippers of 3 types. I have a fresh blade in my X-Acto knife. I have a piece of plywood with some very fine sandpaper stapled to it. And I have a fine flat file and a fine round file. Now, as a model railroader, you're working on plastic, you're working on some wood, and you're also working with some metals. I strongly suggest to you that you have separate sets of files. Working any type of metal with a file mars the file. It clogs the teeth, and it deforms the teeth, even though the file is in fact stronger than the metal that it's removing stock from. When you turn around and take that file to a piece of plastic to not only remove stock but to smooth it, you're going to leave a scar from that file, even if you take a wire wheel to it to clean it up. So it's a good idea to get 2 sets of files. And I've got some blue painter's tape here. If I need it, in the office I have a bag of rubber bands. The first thing I like to do when I build a kit is I like to go into the kit and make sure nothing's missing and that all the parts are not only present, but that they're not warped, which I've had happen in the past, and that none of the parts are what's called a short shot, where the plastic doesn't make it all the way into the mold. So I'm going to shut the camera off, and when I've done all that, I'll come back. We'll start building the kit. I'll show you how to use the nippers if you've never done that before. And then I'm going to go ahead, shut the camera off. I'm going to build the kit. When I'm ready, I'll turn the camera back on out in the garage with the bridge hanging from a piece of thread. We'll get the bridge painted so it'll look the way I want it to look when it's installed, minus any weathering I want to do. And when I'm ready, we'll go down into the basement and position the bridges and everything so I can determine the height of the plywood scenery base that I'm going to use under this area. We'll be back in a minute. All right, well, right off the bat, I've identified an issue. Typically, Walther's Cornerstone kits, especially the bridges, come with a bag, plastic bag in the box that contains all the parts and an instruction sheet. As you may have noticed, there's no bag, and when I lifted the parts out of the box, there's also no instruction sheet. However, I've gone and I've looked in the box for the double track truss bridge, and here we are with a sheet of instructions. I think this instruction sheet, I think they're similar enough, and I built enough bridges on my previous layouts from kits and from scratch that I can go ahead and get this built without an issue. So as I said, this is a sprue nipper. It's intended only to cut plastic. So even though there are no instructions, I went through this anyway, and as you can see, there are the 2 halves of the truss, which is the side portion of the bridge. This part down here has locating holes here and here. Here we have a pin, here we have a hole. Here we have a pin, here we have a hole. So the 2 halves of this are going to go together with the evaporative glue. And the way we're going to do this, just right up against the part, clip this stuff off of here, we're going to take our nice fine file here, and run your finger over the part, find the gate where that piece was, and just kind of gently, there we go, that's nice and smooth. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to clean all these pieces up, get them put together, and then once I figure out my way through this kit, as I said, we'll end up in the garage with some paint and have this hang from a thread, and we'll get this done. Be back in about like this. Hey everyone, I just wanted to quick pop the camera back on. I know I'd spoken earlier about the possibility of using the locking hemostats in model building. The trusses for this bridge, as I pointed out, come in, well, eighths. And they go together. They've got locking pins, or locating pins anyway, but the whole thing is fairly loose. And these are just way too thick for the hemostat to be a viable option. But what does turn out to be a useful tool are these kind of medium-size binder clips. We'll just put one on here, and it holds everything in place quite nicely. It doesn't mar the surface of the plastic. I like to put two of them together, either like this or like this, and it's worked very nicely as I muddle through this kit that I think was probably rated at a train show. I've never seen the Walthers kit that didn't have directions or where the contents weren't in a bag inside the box. So we'll get this finished and I'll see you again out in the garage. Hey everybody, so the single track truss kit from Walthers is done, and I'm 57 and I've been a model railroader since I was in second grade, and there is absolutely nothing I could do to get this kit to go together so it would look like the cover of the box. The parts don't fit well even after a lot of filing, and I ended up to get it to go together half decently. I ended up using some Central Valley truss parts. This was supposed to be a foreground kit, and I'm not sure I can use it. Let me take you guys off the tripod and get a good look at this, because I'm not very happy. Okay everybody, this is the cover of the box. And as you can see, there are no gaps anywhere on the side plates. And these structural members here are clearly, at least they look to be pretty clear, that there are no gaps there either in the center. There were no way to get that stuff in one piece in contact with the other. So let's take a look here at what we actually ended up with. I had to cut out the center section here and install a part that didn't belong there. And if we turn here, the top portion of the truss is too short. There's no two ways about it. You can either end up, you're gonna have a gap here at the end, and you're going to have a gap in the middle, no matter how you do this. So I'm still going to need to come up with a little styrene strip and do a lot of filing to get that to go together properly. Here in the center, as you can see, there's I've added Central Valley truss beams to the center part. If you take a look, this here, the halves, because there's an inner half and an outer half of each truss, the halves here touch each other. there was no way to get the halves of this piece of structure at this end in contact. So again, I had to fiddle around with Central Valley pieces, which thank God they actually go together the way they're supposed to. But as you can see, this here, let me give you a little more light. Hopefully this doesn't blow out the picture. It's pretty bad. The other side, I'll spin it around, may actually be worse. Well, it definitely is worse. You can see the gap there at the bottom, and that again is going to need some styrene strip. There is really no excuse for this. I've been building plastic models for the better part, well, over 40 years. I don't know how I'm supposed to use this in the foreground of my model railroad. The 2-track truss bridge, on the other hand, is going to get together much more nicely, although the directions are clearly wrong, and we'll get into that next. All right, let's take a look at this modernized double-track truss bridge. This kit is so much better than the single-track truss kit. And the reason for that is the parts actually fit each other. Having said that, I'm going to recommend that you not follow the instructions, and I think I may have said that previously. So the instructions are going to tell you to start assembling the halves of the truss kits. They're going to tell you to glue this to this. Bloop. The problem is there are no locating pins or associated receptacles for those pins anywhere on either of these two parts. And then they want you to glue things like this onto that assembly. So my advice, and what I've done, go ahead and put together the deck of the bridge first. As long as you make sure the deck is nice and flat and square, you're going to be well taken care of, because the halves of the truss have an inner half and an outer half. The inner half, every place it attaches to the truss has a rectangular slot that attaches to a stud on the deck. Once you've done that, it's nice and stable, and you have no problem at all attaching all the parts to it. Now, are you going to have to spend a little time with a fine file or maybe an emery board working on the gates where the parts attach to the sprues? Yes, absolutely, you're going to have to do that. And as always, if you work slowly and carefully, it's not going to be a problem. I'm still not sure what I'm going to do with the single track truss bridge. It is straight, but it looks terrible. I'm going to finish this double track truss bridge up tonight. Tomorrow, we're going to go out in the garage. I'll pull the truck out, and we'll shoot some paint and see how they look. And hopefully I won't have to go and custom build something to replace the single track truss bridge. It's supposed to be a foreground kit. I don't know if that's going to happen. So next time I turn the camera on, we will be in the garage with some cardboard and some paint. And we'll be right back. All right, I had originally intended to paint out in the garage, but the weather is poop. So here we are back in the basement. The noise in the background is the dehumidifier running. So before we get started, I want to go over what I use when I paint a building or any kind of structure or piece of rolling stock. I've never had any luck with airbrushes. So I usually use a spray can, and they work nicely. I make sure that I have nitrile gloves. I find that along with paints from Walthers or Testers, when that's available, the other thing that I have good luck with is Rust-Oleum, Painter's Touch. It's intended, among other things, for plastic. I've never had a problem with it not covering. So far as the pigment goes, I've never had a problem with it hiding detail or not sticking, as long as the surface is reasonably clean. The other thing that I like, because I don't have a paint booth, is I have one of these miniature fans, and I can just blow air across the model and help it dry a little faster. If you're going to use a spray can, make sure, regardless of the size of the can, I like to shake it up for a good minute. Structures like buildings tend to be a lot easier to paint because obviously they have flat surfaces. Bridges, on the other hand, do represent a bit of a challenge. There's not just a top and a bottom, it's all full of nooks and crannies. So it takes quite a while and a number of passes to paint one of these bridges. So I've already had this shook up for a good minute and a half. If you're going to use a rattle can and you've never used one before, it is similar to an airbrush in that you don't want to be too close or too far away. If you're too close, you're going to get runs and drips and it's going to look bad. If you're too far away, because the paint is atomized in such small particles, it will actually start to dry before it hits the model, and it may not adhere properly. And you can also get kind of a strange surface to it. I had hoped to have all three bridges to paint here, but you saw how much trouble we had with that first bridge. And so start above and go to below, turn it a little bit, start above, go all the way past it, and then we're going to turn on the fan, let the fan blow on the bridge, and we're going to come back and start all over again. Some of you who may not be experienced modelers may wonder, what color should I paint my bridge? You've got a pretty good amount of latitude with that. You will see railroad bridges that are older, that are a shade of black. They usually end up fading to some sort of gray color. Model paint companies usually refer to that as something along the lines of weathered black. You may see them painted silver, or more appropriately an aluminum color. You can see them some sort of red oxide. And up near my father's house, there's what used to be a New York Central plate girder bridge. Before the short line that now runs that operates those tracks got their act together and put up no trespassing signs, you could walk up to that bridge and see where there is still some paint on it, and some of that paint appears to have actually been green. Whether that was actual paint or primer, who knows? I don't know how many coats of paint it's going to take to cover this bridge, but that's it for this month's video, for this week's video. There were 3 Wednesdays this month, so this is a bonus railroad video. And on the regularly scheduled one, we'll get together and work on the stud wall and the painting and placing the backdrop. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.